Hello everyone, and welcome to the Herbal Knowledge Keepers with Dakota Granny Woman and myself, Blue Star Dear Woman. And today's show is going to be the Uncommon Uses of Common Herbs, Part 2. And again, we are now a full-bloom production, media project umbrella. And what we're doing is we're bringing you programs that are about empowering women's voices.
Well, I wanted to let all you guys know that it's wonderful to join you, and I wish that I could be joining you with high-speed, wonderful internet, but we're recording out in the country, or I'm out in the country, and most folks who deal with internet in the country just know it can be slow as molasses, no matter what they tell you. So we may have little pauses. My voice might get a little bit tweaky. We're going to try to fix that through editing as much as possible. But don't be concerned if you hear dogs howling, wolves howling, plants growing. All kinds of things like that could happen. But for now, we're just going to assume that we can go forward with the show. This is a continuation. Now, I taught a lot of this at the class I did at Moonflower in Texas. So folks who attended that class, some of this will be familiar. There is some new stuff, of course.
And I'm just going to do a little update for those that are viewing this show, the Herbal Database. This is the basic theme of how Dakota presents the extensive amount of research and references that she has compiled into what we call the Herbal Database. And so the reason we pull it up every episode is to continue to help you to become more familiar with it, to understand it, and to utilize it. This database is about empowering each of us as our own healer, and especially in this day and age, as your own advocate. Become educated, become knowledgeable. And so this is a subscription opportunity to you too to access the Herbal Database. So if you have any questions, you can come to the Facebook page, the group, and inquire. And we're always happy to help you.
This is the opening screen in the database, how to use. If you use the search box, so I've entered Plantain into the search box. You know, notice I do not click that search button. It doesn't do anything. You just scroll and find what you're looking for. Now, sometimes if the typing is at a certain pace, it makes a guess as to what you're looking for that's totally wrong. So to correct that, I'm just going to backspace. It guessed again, and this time it got it right. So with Plantain, you see we've got a lot here that I could choose from. There are different types of plantain and different types of preparations that you can make. Plantain seed butter. So it's an edible and a medicinal. And here it zeroes in on some of the things that it does for organ systems. Check out the drug interactions of how to harvest plantain. Plantain leaf pussy toes. Now that is not the Plantago genus. Chinese plantain. So you see we've got a lot. And we're going to just go to broadleaf plantain. So it's blue because it is a wild food, a fantastic medicine. And you see here all kinds of relationships to plantain that you can explore. So I'm going to lift up the information panel. We've got all of these links, and you could click on this video and watch a video that compares common plantain, also called broadleaf plantain, with narrowleaf plantain. But I'm going to tell you some of the unusual things that it does that folks might not know about. This also goes for the ribwort plantain. So that's the real narrowleaf plantain. The folk names can be confusing because there are usually a lot of folk names, and I can't put them all in here or it would be crazy. So the chemicals that are important, some of the chemicals that are important are over here. Those are the purple. And this just says where it likes to grow. We've got a gardening section. This is a property, it's an antidote to poison. In fact, one of the poisons that it helps to protect you from is Tylenol. So I'm going to scroll through this a little bit. It works. It also, if you have cancer and you're taking chemo, using plantain internally will also help protect you from some of the poisoning from cisplatin. It also helps with poison ivy. Up above here are just some of the conditions that you can use plantain for. So I'm using this scroll bar because there's so many, they don't all fit on the screen. So I'm just clicking through before I talk about it to give you a quick view of some of the things that it does, which is a lot. We use plantain all the time for just so many things. It was hard for me to select what would be an uncommon use, you know, when you use it, when you think of plantain as one of your number one herbs for so many things most herbalists do. It's just really hard to go, well, gee, what's uncommon here?
Well, I think when you just shared that it helps, it's an antidote to Tylenol, that sounds pretty uncommon. That's the first time I heard that.
Yeah. Well, there with Tylenol, there actually are several herbs that help if you are taking it. And, you know, I could go on a rant about why you really don't want to be taking Tylenol. But sometimes folks do. If you've got a loved one that's taking it and you can't convince them to stop, maybe you could help them by giving them some of the herbs that do help to reduce the toxic effects, especially to the liver and kidneys. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about plantain now. Some of the things that it does that are pretty cool. First of all, it's going to help with weight loss if you eat it. So it is a wild food. The young leaves especially are nice in salads. Some folks, now I've eaten the older leaves too. Some people say they're too tough, but I've never had that problem. I use them as cooked greens. There can be, depending on the age, a rib that might be kind of tough for you, and you can pull the rib out if you want. The younger the leaf, the less of that you have to deal with. But you can make it also a tea, an infusion using the leaves. It's a good idea to gather plantain and dry it for making infusions when the winter comes and perhaps it's not up. Sometimes here I find plantain all year, but you never know. But what it does is people who are have a high fat diet, and that can result in, you know, gaining weight, especially around the belly. So what plantain does is, and it's kind of complicated chemically, but there's some studies in here that if you really want to get into this, you'll find the studies. But it activates the enzymatic breakdown of fatty acids, and it suppresses formation of these fats, these adipose tissue fats. And did you know that plantain is considered to be an aphrodisiac?
No. I've always heard, I think kava kava as an aphrodisiac.
Okay, well it could be if you're really relaxed and feeling good. That was new to me. I found out about it from a Chinese text that was printed in 1973, and it referenced the use of plantain as an aphrodisiac, but that's all I know.
Well, what would that be, Dakota? What would it be acting upon that would stimulate the
I have no idea. This is like, this is up to you guys to research. I just found out about it from a Chinese text, and they didn't go into how it worked. It was just saying that they used it traditionally in China as an aphrodisiac. Now, it could be, you saw that list that I just went through of all the things that it treats. It could be just because it has such an overall health promoting effect that sometimes when there's a reduction of libido, it's because there's some kind of health issue going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're really, really healthy and balanced and there's harmony in the body, then you can just assume that given the opportunity, that aphrodisiac effect could be there. So it may be kind of indirect,
Well, and the other thing is, if you observe plantain, I mean, it's extremely fertile. It reproduces abundantly, right? So it might be a stimulant in that way, that it just keeps flushing out and creating.
Yeah, but if you think of it in terms of the doctrine of signatures, that makes sense. Now, here's another thing that I thought of as being something uncommon. When we think of taking in herbs to stimulate or modulate the immune system, plantain just generally doesn't come to mind. However, it does. The tincture, the ethanol tincture of plantain does enhance the immune system. And one of the ways it does that is by nitric oxide is one of the ways that it increases nitric oxide production. If you don't know what that is all about, just come to the database and look up nitric oxide. And it increases the production of something called TNF-alpha, which plays a role in reducing tumors. Now, in immunology, nitric oxide is something that's created. This is just one of the things that it does, but it's created by our white blood cells to kill off viruses and bacteria. So that's kind of the method, one of the methods that is being called on to use plantain this way. And it also, this is really interesting, our immune system's T cells start out as little tiny babies in our thymus gland. And they need to start growing up in the thymus gland, and there's something, a certain kind of a lectin that when they come in contact with this lectin, it stimulates them to start growing up very, very quickly. It's a lectin called concanavalin A. You don't all need to know that, but it's found in legumes. So when you eat lentils or pinto beans or any other legume, you get this lectin that's used by your T cells to grow up, and the energy metabolism of these baby T cells is stimulated even more by a plantain extract, because that plantain extract interacts with the lectin to kind of make a chamber of accelerated growth for T cells. Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting. And so, what came to mind is, just to go back a moment to the aphrodisiac, and maybe it's the combination with, say, like a T cell, that it stimulates. It might be stimulating something in our activity.
Okay. It is stimulating different things. We see, we've barely cracked the surface of the complexity of these herbs. understanding them, understanding one herb. You could study one herb for years.
Right.
And keep finding out new things about it. There are herbalists who only work with one or two herbs, period, and understand the herbs so well that they can treat a number of conditions easily. So
that reminds me, Dakota, I always think a wise piece of information when we're exploring herbs and different extracts and, whatever form, is I always love going back to that understanding of a simple, that when we're exploring, like, for instance, you were saying, like, try plantain. When we try it by itself and give it an honest amount of time, it's easier to decipher how it's affecting us as opposed to 3 or 5 different herbs all at once.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. So another thing that it does, some people have problems with gastroduodenal ulcers, stomach ulcers, and in high doses, ribwort plantain. Now this could be true for broadleaf as well, but the studies were done on ribwort, which is the narrowleaf plantain. They found that plantain did a better job of protecting against those ulcers than the standard pharmaceutical drugs. So another thing that it does is it helps to protect or minimize allergies and asthma. So here you can learn how to make a plantain poultice.
I wonder if, how when we take bee pollen, it's always recommended to take it in the local area and it helps with asthma and allergies, but take it within the region that you breathe the air. I wonder if that's the same with the plantain, especially when you brought up allergies.
Well, yes, because that goes for all of the herbs. So, and what's interesting is plantain grows just about everywhere that there are people.
Right.
And that's an indication that there's a tight relationship between humans and plantain and where they live, because one of the other things that plantain does is that it helps restore the compacted earth under the feet of so many people. So it's, when you see it in your yard and in your garden, it has a very beneficial effect on bringing balance back into the soil there.
Nice.
So I am going to show the drug interactions because sometimes we get so excited about these things we forget to look at what kinds of interactions there can be. So, this is mostly related to pharmaceutical drugs here. There can be other cautions. Check always to see if you are using any kind of medication. If there is, just because it's an herb doesn't mean it's safe under all circumstances to take it. So if anyone's on medication, they need to check for interactions. And, I have had quite a challenge keeping this up because we keep finding new drugs that things are interacting with. They haven't all been tested, It's like there's so many drugs. They have not tested all of them with plantain, right? I mean,
And I want to interject here. I know we've brought this up before, but I think it's really important. As we're becoming more knowledgeable and becoming our own health advocates, the point that you're making, I think we need to very, very much pay attention to the understanding of herbs and combinations with other things that may not be the best for our health, that can actually be dangerous, can actually cause death. And I think you know, when we, all along, when we trusted the authority of the medical world, we weren't questioning a lot, but the doctors were being protective of. They knew the complications to a certain extent. And now, remember we brought up the terminology, Dakota, that reverse engineering is now happening in our medical profession as herbalists, as self-healers.
Yeah.
We have to now be responsible for the negative effects as well as the positive. It's, you know, we're going more deeply into plant medicine now.
Yeah. Yeah. And plant medicine, understanding that food is also medicine. So I'm going to just, since we're on that, I'm just going to look up herbal safety so you can see some other issues related to that. Safety and quality control of medicinal herbs. So here's where you can zero in on, if you want to make sure that just even the herbs that you're using are of high quality. Are the herbs from China safe? What about the lead content of the soil? How clean and pure Chinese herbs? Most brands of tea contain these harmful chemicals. So, and about quality control for medicinal plants. So here we see the big section on herb supplement and drug interactions. I'll click on that for a second. So this is pretty thorough here. Like I said, I'm always adding to it when I find something new. And if you know of something that's not here, that's an interaction, let me know and I'll add it. I'm going to use the breadcrumb trail to go back to where I was down here. If you're using Ayurvedic herbs, now the term drugs can be confusing because historically we've used all medicines were called drugs. They weren't just pharmaceuticals. So plantain could be called a drug if it was being provided to treat some kind of a condition. It's a little tricky now because of the legal system that if you call it a drug, that means you have to have it tested. Mm-hmm. So it's a little nebulous, but still historically we called herbs drugs. So here's the Ayurvedic herbs. How safe are they? Here are herbs that may increase blood pressure and essential oils. So any last minute announcements or anything like that we want to do? I'm going to go out. Come
out of that. Okay. Dakota, you will continually have plenty of information to bring to us. And I know that some of our earlier shows, we were going for 2 hours and you still weren't finished. So,
yeah.
So, again, just really grateful for the knowledge that you bring and to remind the viewers that herbaldatabase.org, mm-hmm. That's where you can subscribe. And like Dakota said earlier, the first month you can do for $5 just to explore and see if it's an important tool for you.
Right.
And this has been a Full Bloom production. We are a nonprofit, and pretty soon we're going to launch our new website. But we are inviting any kind of donations to support the empowering of women's voices. And there'll be more shows that we're going to bring to you very soon.